Lesson 1-4 is Properties of Operations. A reminder that if this is your first time using these videos, please make sure you have the audio output up so you can hear it, and please make sure you're listening to the speaker so that you know when to pause the video so that you can try examples. First of all, let's discuss what a property is. It's a rule that is made because numbers act in a certain way when they are put with a particular operation. You have to memorize what these properties look like. A possible good tip is to write each property and an example of each property 5 to 10 times over the next few days that you'll be doing this lesson. You possibly also want to put them on flashcards. The commutative property means that we can switch numbers to get the same answer. For example, 2 plus 4 is the same as 4 plus 2 because they're both equal to 6. The commutative property works with addition and multiplication only. It does not work for subtraction or division. The associative property means that we take groups of numbers and group them differently, and we still get the same answer. For example, 2 times the quantity 4 times 2 is the same as the quantity 2 times 4 times 2. They are both equal to 16. Again, just like the commutative property, the associative property works with addition and multiplication only. The distributive property is multiplication over the course of any of the operations. We take what is outside the parentheses and multiply it by each part inside the parentheses. The phrase each part is the most critical portion of that property rule. For an example, we have 4 times the quantity 2 minus 1 is equal to 4 times 2 minus 4 times 1. The identity property means that we are getting the same answer when we perform an operation. For example, when we add 0, we get the same number. 0, because when we add it, we get the same number, is the identity element for addition and subtraction. 1 is the identity element for multiplication and division, because when we multiply by 1 or divide by 1, we get the same answer. The inverse property is probably the most difficult of the properties. The inverse property means to perform an operation to a number and get the identity element as your answer. A reminder to you from the last slide that 0 is the identity element for addition and subtraction, and 1 is the identity element for multiplication and division. So for the additive identity being 0, when we have the number 4, we want to add negative 4 to it to get 0. For addition, the inverse is the opposite of the number. The inverse element is the opposite of the number. For multiplication, the inverse is the reciprocal of the number. Just a reminder to you that the reciprocal means to flip a fraction. Make the numerator the denominator and the denominator a numerator. If you only have an integer as your inverse, then that means it is over 1. The 0 property only works for multiplication. It's probably something you've known since you were in 3rd grade, meaning that when you multiply anything by 0, the answer will always be 0, regardless of what you're multiplying by. Example, 1,234,567 times 0 will always be equal to 0. Let's play a little Can You Name That Property? Examples of the types of properties are listed at the left. Can you name each of the properties that are listed? Pause the video at this point to give yourself a chance to do the properties. The first example is an example of the commutative property. The next one is an example of the associative property. The next one is the 0 property, followed by the identity property using multiplication. Next is the identity with addition. Next is the additive inverse, followed by the multiplicative inverse. And finally, look very carefully at the last one. Even though there's parentheses, it is actually the commutative property because 2 and 4 switch places. Please make sure you consult your teacher if you're having issues with this particular lesson.